Hello, today I'll be showing you how to use MyBlocks in Scratch. MyBlocks are functions in other programming languages, and they're located in the pink section of Scratch. Their purpose is to group a set of instructions, so this makes your program a lot easier to understand and cleaner. And they create a set of instructions that are reusable, so you can use that one MyBlock over and over again if you need to. I'll be showing you two examples of MyBlocks and a small demonstration that you can do yourself. Our first objective is to make our sprite jump forward, and our second objective is to fade in and fade out an object. So to actually use MyBlocks to make our sprite jump forward, we would need a change y by, a change x by, wait, and change y by and change x by a number of seconds, so we can have our sprite go up by y and over by x a number of coordinates, and then come down by y and over by x a number of coordinates. We then can make our MyBlocks function, which is in the pink section, and we click Make a Block. Here we can give our block a name. So in this case, I'm going to name it Jump. You can name it whatever you want. And I'm going to add 3 inputs. And they have to be a number or text because we want one of our inputs to be the number, the height that the sprite jumps, the amount of time it waits before coming back down, and I want my sprite to say something before it starts jumping. And we will label those too. So I'm going to name it height, delay, and say. That way we have our inputs. And then we can just take all of this and place it beneath our MyBlock to define it. And I want my sprite to say something, so I can also place something like that there. Now we can drag our inputs into the correct spaces. So for height, I would drag it into the change x and y by, and same for the bottom. Don't forget that you actually need this to be a negative because you want our sprite to come back down, so we place one of the operating functions down there and place our height in the negative sign, or after the negative sign we place a 0 there, so we can make sure our sprite comes back down, so that'll always be a negative. So we want to put our say function there and our delay function where the delay function should be. Now that we've defined our function, we actually have it here under MyBlocks. So now we have our little block that we already defined, and we want to use it now. So we can go into the events function and place when a green flag is clicked, and put in our information. So it goes height, delay, say. For height, I want it to be 100. For a delay, I want it to be 1 second. And for say, I want my sprite to say, watch me jump. That seems pretty easy if you ask me. That way, we have grouped all of our code into one little block, and it makes it a lot easier to use. And that way, our sprite jumps now. We can have our sprite jump multiple times too. And this illustrates that MyBlocks are reusable, and this can save from repeating all of this code. So we want to use our MyBlocks function again, and we want our sprite to jump again. I'm going to drag my sprite there so it can jump twice. I want my sprite to jump higher now, and I'm going to say the height should be 150, the delay should be 1 second again, and I want my sprite to say now, watch me jump higher. And that way we actually reuse our function, and let's play that. So we can see our sprite jumps higher the second time we use our jump function. This shows that we can call our MyBlock multiple times and with different parameters. Now I'm going to show you how to use MyBlocks to fade in and fade out objects. This demo will show you how a MyBlocks function can be grouped into a set of instructions, which makes your program easier to understand. We'll be performing this on our backdrop, so be sure to click the backdrop when you're coding. So first we're going to make a block and we're going to name it fade in. And now we have to define this fade in block. So let's go into our control section and get the repeat block out and drag it underneath that fade in block. Now I'm going to go into looks and click the change effect by block and select brightness. I'm going to change the effect to -10 so to make sure it fades in. Now that we have a fade in block, we also need a fade out block. Let's do this by naming another my block and making another my block and naming it fade out. Now we have our fade out block and we want to define this as well. To do this, I'm going to take the script from underneath the fade in and place it underneath fade out. Duplicate it underneath fade out. I want to change this factor to 10. So now we have our fade out and fade in. That's perfect. However, there's some duplication happening between these two blocks, so we can make an even shorter my block as a result. So let's make a new block and name it fade. We're going to put in 2 inputs for our parameters. Parameters are some values that we will pass to our fade block. In this case, we're going to pass the number of repeats and the factor by which the object is affected by the brightness effect. 2 inputs can be named repeat times and change amount. There we go. Okay. Now we can duplicate the script underneath one of our blocks and place it underneath this fade block to define it. So let's do that. There we go. And now we can place the corresponding reporter blocks, these are reporter blocks by the way, and place them in the corresponding sections. So we want to place repeat times in the repeat block and change amount in the change block. Now we can replace the long scripts underneath these blocks with just the fade block to make it a lot easier and refrain from having duplication. So there we go. And now we can fill in our parameters. So I'm going to put 10 for repeat times and -10 for change amount and fade out. And I'm going to put 10 for repeat times again and fade out. I'm going to put 10 and fade in. I'm going to put -10. So now we have our fade in and fade out block. So there we go. So that's how you use my blocks to make a fading in and fading out effect. I also made an example using my blocks to animate a sprite to walk. This example demonstrates several different concepts about my blocks. We first had to create a my block to animate the sprite taking a step with their left leg, as I've done here, and I defined it all. And then we have to test this my block to make sure it works correctly by clicking on the my block to execute it, like this. And it does work correctly. Then, once it works, we also have to create a my block so that she takes a step with her right leg. And again, we have to verify that it works correctly, and it does. We then create a my block to make the sprite walk a number of steps by repeatedly calling the my blocks that make her take steps with her left and right leg. That's this my block that I've also defined. And it's calling the step, calling her to take a step with her left leg and calling her to take a step with her right leg. When doing a project, you can break it down into smaller pieces and then create my blocks to implement those smaller pieces. And then use my blocks to create bigger my blocks until you have a whole project created, like this. This is a big my blocks, and you're breaking down these small my blocks and using them in this big one. You have to keep on testing each of your my blocks along the way to make it sure it works. This is called bottom-up programming, and sometimes in creating or updating the bigger pieces, you need to go back and modify the smaller pieces, but that's okay. So when I was creating this, sometimes I had to come back and fix whatever was here. We also had to add a parameter to the step myblocks to indicate how long each step should take. This example clearly shows the idea of grouping code into a myblock and giving it a name that clearly describes what the group of code does, like stepping with the left leg, and it defines everything that it does. And so it makes the code very easy to understand. This also shows how a myblock can be called repeatedly in the code instead of having to repeat the code that's all involved in it. This is seen when we grouped the code to define the sprite taking a step with her left and right leg. It shows that mybloks can call each other. This is seen when we created a myblock that allowed the sprite to walk while calling on other myblocks, that caused her to take a step with her left and right legs, as I made here. It shows the use of parameters and how myblocks can be called with different parameter values to do different things. For example, the number of steps and time taken to take those steps, as seen here. So this is just an example that you guys can try yourselves, that I made just playing around with Scratch, and you guys can use it in your projects. I think it'll be useful. So that's all for today. Thank you so much, and good luck.